I'm going to go back to what you've said here, Josh, in the script and use it in my own words. Now, after NASCAR looked at the on-track data and everything that was said over the radio, they used that data and they chucked it in the river. They did absolutely nothing. The penalties are absolutely bogus. Just for suspending crew chiefs and giving them a monetary fine is just to show that something's been done, because this will not change. This will happen again next year if the consequences fall the way they did. Byron was on the cusp. He had two Chevrolets catching him. They decided to park up behind him and run side by side to let, I think it was Brad Keselowski, wasn't it? It was the next sort of non-Chevrolet person coming up behind through. They did exactly what they needed to do to keep Byron in his position. And then on the other side of the coin, Wallace was the first person a lap down towards the end of the race. Bell was second of the people one lap down. And Bubba had a tyre going down. Strangely, with 3 laps to go, when other than that his car was fine, and parked up basically to let Bell through in the final corner of the last lap of the race to get into the tiebreaker, which he would have then had to get him through to Phoenix next week. So what a mess. Ruined a great afternoon of racing. It was one of the best short track races we've had for quite some time, because we actually had passing, and that was great. And just ruined the end of the race. Good evening, Joe. He says, I think they should have DQ'd the 3 drivers involved from the race. But again, what difference does it make? Then none of them were in playoffs. This is the point with this system is, if you're out, it doesn't make any difference to you or your team or your sponsors or anything else. So this will happen again. But this is what happens when you have manufacturers battling against each other with that 1 spot difference like we had. It's a good job there was no Ford guys a point in or out, because we would have had all 3 of them playing games towards the end of the race there. So that was one saving grace, I suppose, but it will happen again. And this is just a penalty to show that something has been done. But otherwise, we'll be talking probably about this again next end of October, November, when we go back to Martinsville for this same race.
Yeah, I completely agree. Wouldn't mind having all 3 of us up here on the screen so that I can be talking to Matt as well when I save us here, because I know, Matt, you and I went back and forth a little bit after Austin Dillon did what he did at Richmond, and I think the Richmond comparisons have been brought back up again, because what is everybody comparing this to? They're comparing it to Spingate and the team orders from 2013, and what were the penalties from that? The one guy on Michael Waltrip Racing that didn't have anything to do with the shenanigans that were being pulled, Clint Boyer, was the one who spun out. He got a 50-point penalty, but he was already ahead enough in the chase that it didn't make a difference. He got to stay in. What difference did it make to Brian Vickers? He was the one that came into the pits. He was running part-time that year anyway. The 55 got docked owner's points for whatever that means. I know you and I went back and forth on that a little bit in our chat this week as well. But Martin Truex Jr. was the one that had nothing to do with that, and yet he was the one that got thrown out of a chase for that. In this situation right here, we have Christopher Bell and William Byron. They're trying to, Toyotas and Chevys respectively, are trying to benefit their manufacturer teammates, if you will, because they're not even technically teammates, right? We all know 2311 has an alliance with Joe Gibbs, but especially for Chevy, what good does it do for Richard Childress Racing and Trackhouse Racing if a Hendrick Motorsports driver's in the championship 4 instead of a Toyota Gibbs driver? You know, and those guys are the ones that, you know, William Byron's still going to be racing for a championship this week, despite the actions of the 1 and the 3. And I got to say, we mentioned this on Encore as well, Matt. I don't know if you got to watch the show. Got to hear what Ricky Craven had to say. He was calling for the drivers to be suspended for the week, because they're the ones that were ultimately in control of their race cars. They're the ones that did the actions on the track that NASCAR deemed unacceptable. And I like what NASCAR had to say here as well. I think, again, it's pretty ironic if you want to flash back to 11 years ago. They said there was no precedent to penalize our OEMs, and we'll look into that in the offseason for next year. Well, there was no precedent, like I said a couple of months ago, to put a 13th driver in the chase. You found a way to do that anyway, because you thought that was the appropriate response to what happened at Spingate in 2013. Just because there's no precedent, I feel like when the line is crossed this far and it's this egregious, who else is making these orders? Clearly, like I just said, these are not even teammates. These are just manufacturer teammates. There seem to be only 3 teams in the sport, Chevy, Ford, and Toyota, that are making these calls to these manufacturers, telling them to make these deals, as was said on one of the team radios. I think it was the 3-car. Do they know the deal? Where's that deal coming from? It has to be coming from the manufacturers. So to me, the only way you nip this in the bud as Daniel Trotta said on SiriusXM on Monday, is you have to punish the manufacturers. And yet here, what we see here, suspending crew chiefs or spotters or whoever, again, it's a slap on the wrist penalty to teams that aren't even in the playoffs anyway. What difference is it going to make if they finish 17th or 19th or 21st in the championship regardless? They didn't make their ultimate goal of getting into the playoffs, and these are all the 1 to 3 of 23. They're all teams that, I think had that goal for sure at the start of the year. Certainly, you would think would be an attainable goal for them. So their season's already ruined from that perspective. What difference is it going to make if you dock them 50 more points? You're just kicking somebody while they're down. I just don't see how this does anything to deter a similar situation from happening in the future. Now, the last thing I want to say on this, I heard it on SiriusXM this week as well. Pete Pistone, obviously the individual that I go back and forth with the most in terms of having this very strong disagreement. But he was not the only one, in complete fairness to him. But he wrote the column for Racing America and SI saying, blaming the playoff format is a convenient way of not taking responsibility for your actions. And he goes on to say that you can't blame the format here because in any close championship fight, we could still see shenanigans like this. But I think the counter to that has to be, and you saw it from, again, a champion of a sport in Brad Keselowski right after the race ended, this format incentivizes what we saw. It makes it more likely because it tries to guarantee this outcome, and not just for the championship, for who's going to be the fourth and final driver in the standings, who's 1 point above this magical cut line that we got here. And you've got 2 different manufacturers with 5 different organizations involved, all pulling these shenanigans, all getting on the radio, trying to manipulate the outcome of the race, get them 1 more point so that they can be 1 point to the good. I don't think we get that. Maybe we get it at Phoenix. I don't know. I mean, Pete brought up the example of owners entering start and park cars so that they could park them if their main car ran into trouble and they'd lose a few more points. I don't even know if that's close to a relevant analogy, but I guess if you want to call that race manipulation, I will take that 1,000 times out of 1,000 over the mess that we saw on Sunday. My biggest frustration out of everything that we've seen the last 72 hours or so is that they want you to blame everything. And by they, I mean the Pete Pistones of the world. I mean Elton Sawyer with him saying you got to bring your A game every single week with this format. Give me a break. Tyler Reddick certainly didn't have to because he was already locked in. He is fortunate he's locked in because he had a terrible day, and he's still going to be racing for a championship. They want to blame everything except the system that incentivizes this. And they will do nothing but complain about other people complaining. It's as if the system is so great and so perfect and so revered that we can do everything but criticize that one thing. We can look at the drivers, we can look at the teams, we can look at the manufacturers, we can give them a slap on the wrist penalty, we could suspend them for a week. Even if we did that, we are blaming everything, or we're being told we're allowed to blame everything but the system. And again, I think there are so many layers to what the culture that this system has given this, that has brought to this sport over the last 10 years, especially. You can go back 20 years to the original chase, but especially the last 10 or 11 seasons that we've had the elimination format. There's such a ripple effect. It's not just who's the most deserving champion. We could have, Joey Logano's average finish is down to 17s this year. That would easily be a new record for lowest finish if he wins this championship. There's so many different layers to this. It doesn't just impact that. It impacts what we see in cutoff races, and particularly what we see at Martinsville. And Denny Hamlin put it perfectly on Actions Detrimental this week. It's not a Martinsville issue. It is a cutoff race issue. The very first year, everybody remembers Ryan Newman almost winning the championship without winning a race. Did you remember that he only got into the round of 4 by 1 point because Jeff Gordon crossed the line in second thinking he was good? I wonder if Matthew Owens is in our chat here. I know he certainly remembers this. I see a comment from him there. Jeff Gordon fans thought they were good, right? But Ryan Newman was told, you got to get this one more spot. So he had no problem shoving Kyle Larson out of the way, putting him in the wall. And I think the general sentiment, probably not from Jeff Gordon fans, but the general sentiment at the time was, hey, this format requires stuff like this. And this is going to be the start of such a great new era and everything. And it, to me, at least, has just been the complete opposite of it here. And Matthew says it's time for us to all admit that this format invites this kind of race manipulation, and that's okay. We accept it in F1 and whatever other discipline. It's time to accept it here. I apologize if I'm cutting out. I'm getting the message that my internet might be dipping again.
No, you're fine.
Hopefully you guys can still hear me. But he's exactly right. Even and again, this is the third time this week I'm calling out our friend Seth Eves here, because Seth and I have had this discussion for the last several years, and he has been a very staunch defender of the playoffs, very staunch defender of needing to have something to talk about this time of year, not having the championship decided early, not having a full season points format. But even he messaged me, and he sent me his own tweet on Sunday night and said, you can repost this, you can talk about it on your shows. I've had enough. I'm done. This was my breaking point. So I feel like even fans that like the excitement of this system, that defend this system, they can still look at this and say, well, hold on, we don't want this. So even if the answer, I think the answer, of course, is changing the system, but I'm also a realistic person. I know we're not going to get that from today's NASCAR leadership. They want this system. They're going to keep this system. Even if that's not the answer, we have to do something that sends a message that lets these teams know this is unacceptable, this is not okay. Because quite honestly, the situation that we have here, if the manufacturers are fine with their spotters or their crew chiefs sitting out the last race when they're crew chiefing non-playoff teams that aren't even the ones they're worried about competing for a championship, but they're trying to get into a championship for, what's $100,000 to, 2311 Racing or Richard Childress Racing with all the sponsors and all the corporate partners that they have, or certainly if you find the manufacturers, I mean, I think you need a bigger punishment of some sort than just a fine to a ultra, Fortune 500 company like a Chevrolet or a Ford or a Toyota, like a manufacturer like that. I just think that what we saw this weekend is clear, blatant race manipulation, beyond unacceptable, and the penalties that we've been given here have just not done anything to make me confident that we're not going to see it again as early as next year.
Sorry, Josh, before you come back in, we had the same discussion on USRN after we'd finished calling the race last week. We were hanging on, as everyone was, to see what they were going to do immediately afterwards. And our chat turned to, well, what can we do from here? We can't go back. We're kind of, as you mentioned, Ben, we're kind of in this position with this point system and such like. Two things I want to mention also from what happened on the racetrack on Sunday, because first time I've been on the air since, so get this out. Dillon and Chastain especially, and Wallace, I suppose, to a similar degree, were only doing what they were told. Austin Dillon's not driving around there going, I better not pass Byron. He doesn't know that he could be 12 points in or whatever at this stage. He doesn't know what's going on. Well, he might do, but realistically speaking, they don't know what's happened with all the other guys around the bubble at that point in the race. So he's not going to get to the 24 and go, I better stay here. Not going to overtake him just in case. They were all being told. There was a tweet I saw. I didn't see it till Monday. If you remember during the race, Ryan Blaney used Shane Van Gisbergen as a bit of a bumper to get past, I think it was Byron actually at the time. And they radioed to SVG at some point during stage 3, one of the cautions. You've got the 12 behind you. Remember what he did to you earlier, or something along those lines in terms of points. And he just laughed it off as like, I'm not getting involved. This isn't, I'm a part-timer. I don't care.
So that's a sixth team and not even a full-time driver that they were trying to get involved in all these shenanigans.
I know it's happening everywhere. And as I said before, if you're going to have manufacturers, you're going to have this. And if, two more points, if Byron doesn't get in, Chevrolet are out. Their season's over. They may as well stay at home next week. They've got no one. They would have had nobody in the playoffs. It would have been, 2 Fords and 2 Toyotas if Bell had got in. And
you can't put Bell in, though.
On Bell, he messed up. He went into turn 3 way too fast, locked the rears, and he hit the wall. He wasn't trying to hit the wall and do a Chastain, as everyone. Oh, he did the.
Yes,
he did the melody. You can't do that. No, Josh. He threw, and you could tell from his interviews when he was sitting on the pit wall. He was like,
he knew he'd done wrong because
if I get in, I messed up, and I still did it because I messed up big time.
Yeah, I mean, I admit he went in too fast, but as soon as he knew he was going towards the wall, he went straight down and he knew what he needed to do. It was a carbon copy. I called it, but it was the second one.
I know you did. I've seen the end of your call. Yeah. But
sorry, Ben.
He messed up. He messed up. put himself in the position to have to do that, to then get back in front of Wallace before he got to the line, because obviously if he'd finished behind him, he would have been out by 1 point. Yeah. And none of this conversation would have been happening, relatively speaking.
But to your point, Aaron Bearden tweeted this as the race was wrapping up. Man, Bell did NASCAR a huge favor by riding the wall. I have no idea what choice they could have made without that. Would have had to review Bubba's situation in depth, figure out how to rule in a pair of potential manipulation situations. So in this, because Bell rode the wall, I suppose you could make the argument that what the Toyotas did and what the Chevys did cancel each other out. So then all you have to look at is Bell riding the wall. That puts him out, that puts Byron back in. But again, I like the idea that Del Reynolds proposed on YouTube this week. Just make up for what you did in 2013. We had 13 drivers in the chase. Let's just have a championship 3 this year, because neither Chevy or Toyota should be able to get away with what they tried to do with their manipulation shenanigans on Sunday night.
No, because as Matt said earlier on, the Chevys might just as well stay at home. They've got no one. They'll have no one there. They can just stay at home. So it would become like cars. We'll just have those 3 on the circuit because everyone else will back out. There's no point in running. Yeah,
and Matthew brings up a fair and valid point here. We have to draw a line on what we care about and what's too far. Drafting at Daytona, doing what Blaney did to help Logano in the last laps at Vegas. Teams pitting next to each other. What's the line? I don't know. I feel like, because people brought up, they work together at Daytona and Talladega all the time, but that's a track where you have to work with your teammates in the draft, and that's part of the accepted ethics of racing. There, you're not going to win without a drafting partner. I mean, and poor Parker Retzlaff, this came back this weekend too. I mean, just absolutely so wrong how he got treated by the execs at Chevrolet and what happened to him. I hope that that it's not a stain on his career, because it certainly shouldn't be. He was trying to do what he could do to put himself in the best finishing position. It was only his second ever Cup start, and you just happened to be in position to push it forward to the win in Harrison Burton. And it's absolutely a criminal how they treated him after that race. So I don't know. I don't think that you can really draw drafting comparisons here. I know that, I'm trying to think, I think Kurt Busch got that win at Atlanta back when he and Ross Chastain were Ganassi teammates, and Ross, he kind of used Ross as a pick there. I feel like that kind of gets into the little sort of the more shenanigan type sort of deals here. But
do you want to go back to the most famous one?
Sure.
2001 Daytona 500. Just saying.
Yeah.
You've got Dale Earnhardt, who's got 2 teams ahead. He's drivers ahead of him, driving for his team. He's holding back. He's decided that he's not going to go for it, and his drivers are. And he's ducking and diving, stopping everybody going through. And then you've got Michael Wardrobe being pushed over the line. I
don't know if Michael. Yeah, I mean that's a fair point, though. That is a fair point.
It's the most famous one I know of.
Yeah, and it ended unfortunately, and it ended in tragedy. But I don't know. I mean, I guess that, but again, imagine if we had a playoff system in 2001, right? I would think Dale Sr.'s maybe got to think he's going to win a race at some point anyway. It's Michael Waltrip's first race. Why not get Michael in the playoffs? And then, that's his best chance to win. I mean, this system invites so much of this crap.
It's broken. It's broken.
I don't know why it's a cardinal sin to look at the system that we have to crown our champions that puts these drivers and these manufacturers in these positions where it tempts them to do this. And then they actually do it. And we say, oh, well, will you please not blame the playoff system? That's such a cop-out. That's so, that's really, again, it just drives me insane that we can't even have the conversation. If we want to agree to disagree, that's fine. But can we should not be considered bots on Twitter for even asking the question. That's really what gets under my skin. Why can we not even have the conversation in the first place? That's what I want to know.
Are we still talking about NASCAR or the general election?
Well,
just
it's a good metaphor too. We can't even have the conversation anymore.
No, you can't.
Before we move on, 2 additional points of the same conversation, but not NASCAR related. No one was bothered that Oscar Piastri moved over on Saturday and gave Lando Norris an extra point. Not that it mattered in the end. We'll talk about that later. Unless you put everybody in the same vehicle with the same engine and the same badge on the front, this is going to happen.